Dear brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa barakatuhu. Rahmatullah. We are happy to be with you tonight, this afternoon, with my friend from the Science Research Foundation. We are actually spokesmen for worthy author, dear Mr. Harun Yahya. I hope many of them also know his writings and his books. Tonight, and also we would like to thank the organizations, all the Muslim brothers who have helped us here and who has contributed to the realization of this organization and of this wonderful event. I wanted to speak to you about a subject that is one of the basic issues of Brother Harun Yahya. This is called the evolution deceit, or we can call it the fall of Darwinism. As we have known, Darwinism has been an ideology which is put forward in the 19th century, and it is imposed onto people as a scientific fact. And the core of this theory is to make people deny creation, to make people deny the existence of Allah. Both in the Christian world and both in the Islamic world, atheists, materialists, those people who are trying to push people away from religion, are strongly supporting this theory to brainwash people, especially the young and educated generations, to turn them away from God. This is like an ideology like Marxism or other ideologies of the modern age, which is totally irrational, which has no scientific basis, but it is just for the sake of ideology, their atheist ideology, it's supported. So tonight I just want to make a few brief insights of how Darwin's theory of evolution is refuted by science. You can find much more detailed information in the books of Harun Yahya. Now let's start with our slides. Okay. I'm just a little behind. That's the problem. Now let's see this picture. Here's a peacock, a very beautiful animal, and several animals in nature with nice colors. If you saw this picture made by an artist, not a photograph, but by a picture made by an artist himself with his brush, you would wonder how great is this artist who made such a wonderful design in this picture. He painted everything, the feathers, they had very good color, matching wonderfully. You would say, what a great artist who has made this picture. But this is not a picture. This is a living animal. It is much more complex than a picture on a paper. So we should conclude, we should ask, who is the artist then of this great thing that we see? And millions of other life forms, millions of other animals in our bodies. There are numerous examples of design, art, balance, harmony. There's a great design in nature. We should ask ourselves, who is the artist? And the answer is obvious. It is Allah, the one and only God. But Darwinists are trying to turn people away from this answer. And what they're trying to say is that they argue this is all by chance. Everything happened by chance. This peacock gathered tails, all these feathers and wonderful things by chance. All the animals, all our bodies, just a few proteins and a few chemicals in the water, they just turn into bacteria, bacteria turn into fish, fish into monkeys, and they turn into man. This is the story. But it's not true, it has no scientific basis. Okay, this is the picture of Charles Darwin. Know this guy, he's one of the biggest deceiters, deception, one of the people who deceived so many people in the world, and we are not trying to refute his theory, we are refuting his theory. Okay, I want to start with a nice cartoon actually. Some of you can find amusing. Now, as you see in the cartoon, this is a story that I told you. Here we have a sea here, a little pond, and there something happens, an animal appears here, it turns into fish, fish into reptile, it bites its other tail, and then it's going to go into something else, it becomes a monkey, another monkey, and Charles Darwin himself. Okay. That is funny. If it was a cartoon, yeah, we would mind that. But they claim this to be scientific. They claim this to be science itself. They say that's evidence. And I want to start with the just very first link in this, idea, this whole picture. Let's think about this very single thing in here, okay? If this theory was true, we should see things like these happening in nature. In the first place, in some water, you should see inanimate life, some chemicals turning into something living, some animals. This is an idea which has never been observed, and in fact, scientists over the 150 years are trying to create the very simple cells, bacteria, the very simple cells, the most basic animals, the very most simple life forms. They cannot even make just single bacteria. No scientist ever, in the most developed laboratories they have, couldn't make even just single cell. It has never been observed that it could happen by chance. So why did Darwin argue his theory? Why did he say that just a single cell happened and turned into others? Because he had a good reason. In his book, Darwin said the first cell appeared in a warm little pond. Just a piece of water, and it would happen itself, he said. Why was he arguing that? He had a good reason. Because he had a very poor technology. These are the microscopes of Darwin's day. Again, both from the 19th century, this is one, this is another. You see, these are very primitive devices compared with the modern technology we have today. And Darwin and his followers and all his supporters couldn't see what is there in a cell. They thought it's very simple. Just a few chemicals come together and become cell, and those cells unite. It becomes a monkey. It becomes a man. This was the story. So this was a theory of ignorance. It was a theory based on ignorance, no scientific fact. 150 years later, now scientists have realized even that little cell we cannot see is so complex that we cannot make it ourselves. In our one single cell, in our DNA, the part of it called the DNA, which has our genetic code, we carry a great library. If we want to write the information which is in our cells, which is a cell, maybe some of you cannot imagine what's a cell. In just one tiny point, just take a ballpoint, put it on paper. That tiny point, if it was in your body, it would have hundreds of thousands of cells in it. And in just one of them, there's information defining your hair, defining your eyebrows, defining your eyes, your color, your skin, your organs, everything. Your bones, how they're shaped. And if you write that information onto paper, it would take 900 volumes of Encyclopedia Britannica. Just in single cell. It is so complex, it's amazing. I want to show you a little, for example, device. This is, again, a part of the cell, a bacteria. This is an electric motor which helps the bacteria to move in motor. It has more 20 and 50 parts, just in, it's an electric machine. And, it's a nightmare for Darwinists. They can't explain how this happened, An American scientist called Michael Behe, he's a very famous scientist who refutes Darwin's theory, and he says just this is the complexity in the cell is enough to bury Darwin's theory in history. Okay, we can go ahead. Now, just to give an example to you, to grasp it, I want to quote an atheist scientist. This is an atheist, but he makes a confession. He says, "The chance that higher life forms might have emerged by chance is comparable to the chance that a tornado sweeping through a junkyard might assemble a Boeing 747 from the materials therein." A junkyard, just a few, storm comes and, junkyard, tornado, and just a great plane like this happens to be. Who would believe in that? It is an insane idea. And he says, to have a cell like this, it's as difficult as this. And live the cell, just imagine yourselves, ourselves, our bodies. It is more than insane. You cannot find the word to, you cannot find the right word to define it. It's how insane, how irrational it is. Now let's go on. This is one part of the story. Life forms, all the animals, plants are so complex that chance is a ridiculous term. to describe how they came into existence. Now let's move on to another part. You may see things like this in newspapers, in magazines sometimes. It is called the tree of life. Darwinists claim that you had a first cell in the beginning, and it turned into a fish, frog, reptile, horse, ape, a gentleman like this standing and thinking. You, again, another branch, it turns into fish, raccoons, things like this, insects, plants, and everything. They say they evolved into each other, by cumulative, small changes. Time happened, just monkey slowly turned into man and other things. Now, if this was true, there should be a great evidence for it. And the evidence is the fossils. Because animals leave their traces behind. When they die, some animals are, they're caught between the rocks, so we have their fossils. When we look at the fossil record, we see these animals here. We have lots of fish. We have, in the museums, we have millions of fish fossils. We have millions of frogs, millions of horses, millions of apes, millions of fish, birds, everything. But we don't find any transitionals. Let me explain how. Here's Darwin's story again. They say, some invertebrates, like starfish, evolved into fish by stages. If it was true, you should find the fossils of these, and these, creatures, some weird creatures like this, half, not just fish, not just, starfish, just something in between. And you should have also these. But what we have in the fossil record is much different. We have starfish fossils, millions of them. We have fish fossils, millions of them in laboratories. Go to British Museum or Natural History Museum, you'll find these, you'll see these. But we don't have any fossil of these weird creatures that Darwin imagined. They are not existing. Well, Darwin was aware of this. He was very afraid of this, in fact. Let me make a quote from him. He said, in his book, The Origin of Species, "Why, if species have descended from other species by fine gradations, do we not everywhere see innumerable transitional forms? As by this theory, innumerable transitional forms must have existed. Why do we not find them embedded in countless numbers in the crust of the earth? This difficulty for a long time quite confounded me." Yeah, he had this difficulty. And 150 years later, still Darwinists themselves have the same difficulty. There is no transitional form. All animals appear suddenly in the fossil record. You have find fish. Before then, no fish in the earth. Then it starts to appear. Millions of fish in the fossil record appear. This means they are created. They did not evolve from something else. They just appeared there, just with one word, just be the word of creation. And this is the scientific proof of that. I want to just give a little insight about this, sudden appearance. There is a geological time. Scientists give names of geological times. Maybe you have heard the Jurassic Park from Newry. The Jurassic is a name of a geological period. And we have something like the Cambrian. It's a technical term, not so important, but there is something important. In this Cambrian age, all major animal groups appeared all of a sudden. No ancestral forms, amazing complexity in all groups. There are 50 groups of animals, 50 major groups. All of them appeared suddenly in the Cambrian, without any ancestors. And Darwinists are very, very, afraid of this fact. They want to hide this. They want to hide this under the carpet. I want to make a quote from a very strong, hardcore Darwinist here about this fact, about this Cambrian fact. He's a guy called Richard Dawkins. You have his picture here. He's a British. He's in Oxford University. You may find his books on the shelves and everywhere. He's a strong atheist. He calls himself a militant atheist, and his life is devoted to combating against religion and the faithful. And let's see what he says about the Cambrian explosion. The explosion means they all appeared, except suddenly. What he says is, let's read. The Cambrian strata of rocks are the oldest ones in which we find most of the major invertebrate groups. And we find many of them already in an advanced state of evolution, according to his theory. The very first time they appear, it is just as though they were just planted there without any evolutionary history. He says it's just there, it's though, he says, but the fact is they were planted there without evolutionary history because they were created. All animals, all plants were created. I want to show just one single example of a fossil. Let's imagine how complex they were. This is an animal called a trilobite. This is one of the animals that suddenly appeared in the Cambrian. It's a sea animal, lives under the sea. It is, according to scientific calculations, it's 520 million years old. And the strange thing about this animal is it has the first eye on Earth. Before this animal, there were just a few bacteria. You had no animal with a vision. It has the first eye. And the eye was amazing. Let's take closer to it. This is the eye of a trilobite. You see these little things here? All of them each of them is a single eye itself. And in each part here, each cell here, you have not one, two lenses, double lens system. Because of this, the system, the animal could perfectly see under the water. And without any history, without any evolutionary history, it just appeared on rocks. No transitional forms, no ancestors, just appeared there, just planted there, just created there. And to give you another idea about this eye structure is again similar to the ones that we have in flies today. This is a modern fly of our day. See his eye system, the very system which this creature had. This is 500 million year old. This is just today's fruit fly as we know, the common fly. The strange thing is that the eye appeared suddenly and it did not change through 500 million years. It did not evolve into something else. The very first plan, the very first design is still in the nature. There are some other fossils which again show us that there is no evolution in nature. I just choose 3 examples. There are hundreds of these. Here's a 100 million year old ant, which is similar, no difference of modern ant. Again, 135 million year old dragonfly, and it's fossil just near it. No difference. Again, you have a 50 million year old bat, and it has no difference from the modern bats that we have today. We have lots of animals like these, living fossils, and they all show that there is no evolution in the history of nature. And it's a fossil shark 400 million years ago, the same as we have today. Okay. Now after these, just a brief summary. I want to tell you about the story that the evolutionists like most. The myths of human evolution. The ape man, the strange weird creatures, hairy creatures living in the caves and making strange sounds. And they say, these are our forefathers. We descended from them, those, weird creatures. This is again one of the myths of Darwinism, which has no scientific value, which has no scientific proof. Let's just briefly examine. This is a picture. You can find similar things everywhere, in newspapers, in magazines, in advertisements. And this is the basic of the human evolution story. Here you have an ape, and it just becomes, straighter. It just becomes straighter. It becomes bipedal, and at the end, it becomes a human like us. They like the story, but it is just a story, like the children believe, like a frog turning into a prince. Frogs turn into princes in stories, but in real life, those things do not happen, and in real life, evolution do not happen. The important thing is that what we have in the fossil record, we have these apes. They're true, the ones in the beginning. We have man, but we don't have any clue, we don't have any scientific proof of these weird creatures that the evolutionists assume. They are not existing, they're just in the minds of the evolutionists. Let me show you, again, a picture of the ape man. What they do to deceive the society is to use a technique called reconstruction. You can see faces like this, happy family here, you know, a wife and a husband. They're hairy, they're half ape, half man. And it is so realistic that when you see it, you can think, oh, really, these things like this happen? They lived. Why would otherwise they would draw something like this? They draw something like this because their theory needs it. I want to show you how these are created. It's a technique called reconstruction. Now, here's an evolutionist here, an artist. He takes, you know, facial tissues and, you know, from a man. Then he puts it on an ape's skull with his hand and brushes it how he wishes, according to, you know, his theory. No scientific proof. And at the end, you have a handsome guy here, an ape man. All the details you see in his face is just made by his brush. You could draw a man with the, you know, wings flying in the air. Could it be a scientific fact? No, this is the same thing. I want to make a quote from an evolutionist again about the weirdness, about the nature of these reconstructions. He says, to attempt to restore the soft parts is an hazardous undertaking. The lips, the eyes, the ears, and the nasal tip leave no clues on the underlying bony parts. You can, with equal facility, model on a Neanderthaloid skull the features of a chimpanzee or the lineaments of a philosopher. Now, this is important. These religious restorations of ancient types of man have very little, if any, scientific value and are likely only to mislead the public. So put not your trust in reconstructions. Now, he says something important, a long quote, but there's one thing important. He says soft parts, like the eyes, the lips, the hair, they don't leave any trace in the fossil record. In the fossil record, you just find a bone, a part of a man's skull. You don't see how its face looks, how its hair looks, how its bones, you know, nose. You cannot see it. But evolution is what they do. Let's see. They draw pictures like this, according to the theory. Now look at this. In the fossils, we have no clue of an hair. He has hair. No clue of, you know, ears. We have ear. Nose, lips, everything. And look at the eyes, so realistic. You know, this is not based on a fossil, it's based on the imagination again. So, this is fake. I want to show you again an example how unrealistic, how speculative these things are. This is a drawing based on a single skull, 3 drawings based on a single skull. This is a skull called Australopithecus africanus. It was found in the 1920s in the first, then many other forms of found. Now, 3 different evolutionists draw 3 different faces. One like this, National Geographic, one like this, and the other one like this. You could have a 4th, a 5th, a 6th version of it. Because it's not science, it's just, you know, imaginary drawing. So when you see these things like this, be sure that it's just, you know, piece of art, but no evidence, no scientific evidence. And I want to tell you a funny story, actually, but it's a true story. Here is a very important tooth in the history of science. It's just a single tooth, but it was important, according to evolutionists. This tooth was found in Nebraska, in the United States, in 1920s. And the evolutionist who found it was so enthusiastic about his theory that he called this tooth the Nebraska man. He said this tooth had some features of an ape and had some features of a man. You know, just a single tooth. They said it was transitional, both features of apes and man. And he drew a picture of this. Yeah, here's the Nebraska man. He drew the man and also his wife. His tools from just single tooth. No, he could make it something more. Yeah. Now the funny thing is that, and this was, you know, in the headlines. Newspapers had headlines. They said Darwin's theory is proved true. A new fossil evidence came. We found the ape man we're looking. For many years, it was propagated. And at the end, do you know what happened? The tooth did not belong to an ape. It did not belong to a man either. It was a tooth of a wild pig that lived in the Nebraska area. A Nebraska man turned out to be the Nebraska pig, actually. Another important story in the history of science. Take a look at this picture. This is taken in 1910 in England, in a place called the Piltdown. These people are making a scientific discovery. They said they found, these people, find the ape man, the perfect ape man. They went out with a skull. It was named the Piltdown skull, based on the place it was found. Here is this story. You can see the skull here. This was a skull. It's this part, its skull part was very human-like. It was like just normal human. But the strange thing was the jaw and its teeth, the teeth in the lower jaw was very ape-like. So they said this is the perfect transitional form they're looking for many years. So you had pictures of it in newspapers. You had statues of it. It was put to the British Museum in London. And hundreds of university theses were written on this. How Darwin's theory came true and blah blah, all those things. And these people became very famous. But the fact is that in 1953, and one more thing, I forgot that. This skull was claimed to be 500,000 years old. Okay, don't know, 500,000 years old. In 1953, another scientist called Oakley, he wanted to re-investigate this fossil. He took permission from British Museum, and he made that age test. Want to age it again to make it perfectly fit. And what he found is that the skull, surprising result, the skull was just 100 years old, and the jaw, it was just 2 years old. How can it be? They just furthered the investigation, went deeper, and then it was discovered that this is a hoax. This was one of the greatest hoax in the history of science. The fact that the jaw was belonged to an orangutan, and the skull belonged to a man. What they did was they just fixed them together, put into acid to make it look old. Just by they just made the feet fit in there, by making little cutting to things like that. Here's what they do: an orangutan jawbone to a human skull. They take the jaw, fit the skull, fake fossil, and you have the perfect ape man you're looking for. This the only way they can get it. So, history of evolution is full of things like this, and you can find this myth imposed on everything, even in a computer advertisement. The computer I'm using, unfortunately, but everywhere they're imposing us into his brain. You're just walking on the street, you see the ape man, you see man standing up. Be sure that this has no scientific basis. Today I am not going into details, but in the world now today there are many scientists who show that this is simply fake. There is no scientific evidence. And even evolutionists themselves are trying to accept that their theory is based on prejudice, their theory is not based on scientific evidence. They don't have, of course they say it very vaguely. They say, we don't have the evidence yet, but in the future we will find it. Research is going on. You will hear things like this, but be sure that they have no evidence. And I want to make at the end, I want to make a quote from the Holy Quran. Your God is God alone. There is no God but Him. He encompasses all things in His knowledge. This is an important verse which should guide our lives in every minute, in every form, in every day. Darwinists, they imagined a God called nature. You hear this, nature created thing, nature created this, Mother Nature gave us eyes, Mother Nature this and that. This is just a fake, this is just a pagan idea. Like pagans had nature gods, and these guys in the modern age, they have Darwin's theory and the Mother Nature idea. They are believing in a false God. That God called nature cannot create anything. It is the collection of all things that is created. And there is only one God, that is Allah, and we should say to the Darwinists that our God is alone, but there is no God but Him, Allah. Thank you for listening to me.